Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? Great. Well, it's great to be here back in California. You are all aware of this, but I think nationally you should know how important we all view this state being in terms of not just being what is at the fifth largest economy in the world, but for students, for the students that we care about. At Aspen, we started the higher education programs 6 or 7 years ago. I came to start them, and we very intentionally focused on community colleges because, well, we believe that this is where the students of today and tomorrow are. We believe that if we care about social mobility in our country, we better get this right. Because students are relying on us, 6 million students nationally in credit-bearing classes, another 4 or 5 million who are in non-credit-bearing courses who are looking to us to have a better life, right? Social mobility depends on our work. It also really matters because of the strength of the economy in our regions. Community colleges have long been much more closely aligned and more responsive to local economies. Is there work to do on that front? Of course. California has been a great pioneer in providing information to all of you about what the labor market outcomes are for your students, whether they're in degree programs or these career builders, as my friend Kathy Booth likes to call them. So community colleges are really critical if our country is going to realize the promise of social mobility, and that requires having strong communities where there are jobs available for folks. And so it's really with those twin goals in mind that we started the higher education programs at Aspen. We started our work with community colleges, and 7 years later, it's still the vast majority of what we do. So the first thing that we did at Aspen is we created this thing called the Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence. Anybody here from Santa Barbara? All right, congratulations. Santa Barbara is one of the 4 winners of the Aspen Prize. And Pasadena and Chaffey have been recognized as well. Congratulations in this past cycle. And so what do we do? What is the Aspen Prize? Well, for 6 years, what we've been doing is looking at outcomes in 4 areas and trying to figure out which institutions are achieving high and improving levels of student success in student learning, in completion, in post-graduation success, and by and large in the labor markets, but also in transfer and baccalaureate attainment, and in equitable outcomes across all of those measures. And what we found is that really remarkable levels of success are possible. The winner of this year's Aspen Prize has a 67% 3-year graduation rate. Pretty remarkable. Lake Area Technical Institute. Valencia College in Florida has saw in a 7-year period a 60% increase in the credentials offered. This is a college of 50,000 students. An incredibly diverse college that is linking to both workforce and to transfer. And so the question really is, it's nice to celebrate community colleges, and part of what we're doing is elevating all of your work by recognizing these colleges. But much more importantly, the question is how? How do colleges achieve success against that 4-part definition? And one of the things that we've seen is that guided pathways is part of the answer, a big part of the answer at a lot of these colleges. Because guided pathways have enabled Lake Area Tech, I just mentioned, the 67% graduation rate. You can't sign up for a course at Lake Area Tech. You can only sign up for one of 30 programs of study. Now, that's not going to happen in California. Right? You're not going to do away with course enrollments. You have a lot of reason to do course enrollments, career builders, as I just mentioned. But what can we learn from places that have guided pathways, that have gone down this road and enabled success? And we always have to remember that success needs to connect to what it is our students and communities need. So I always like to start in these presentations by hearing from the people who matter most.
College has always been like a must-do in my house. So ever since I was younger, I wanted to be a doctor. Only way I knew I do it was you have to go to school, you have to take the classes and stuff. But as I got older, I decided to change. I wanted to be a NBA agent. So you still had to go to college for that. So that's one of my dreams, to be in managing pro athletes like that. So I have to get an education.
the more I got older, the more I felt like I needed to go to college. Like especially seeing my dad work. He's been working out in the heat since he was about 18 years old. And, if he didn't go to college, he didn't even finish high school. And I think if he would have gone to college, and all that, he would have definitely been somewhere else in his life. And, the sun wears on you a lot, and, I want to be working inside. And if you go to college, I'm sure you're going to get a better job, so a better life.
So this is why students come to us. Students come to us to have a better life. But you heard in that not a lot of detail about what that really meant. And so it's really up to us to organize ourselves in a way that can deliver what it is that students come to us for, which is, frankly, a better life than they would have had if they didn't come to us. That means different things to different students. But completing a degree that is aligned to transfer, that's aligned to the workforce, in fact, gets them a lot closer to that than not completing that credential. So I want to talk a little bit today, and what we're going to focus on in this session and then the third session is, what does it mean? How do you achieve large-scale change? Who was it that asked the question, how are we going to prevent this from being 4 years of work, and then we're going to not see anything at the back end? I wasn't in the... Can you raise your hand? Somebody asked that question earlier. It was a terrific question. And the real answer to that question, what we see in the field is that efforts, leadership for systemic change, leadership from the top, from the board requires leadership at the presidency level, senior leadership team, but also leadership from the middle, leadership from faculty, from staff, really matters. And so what does that look like? What does change look like? So at Aspen, we've looked at 30 colleges that have achieved high levels of success. We have focused on the subset that are winners and finalists with distinction and Rising Star Award winners at Aspen. And we've asked the question, what does it look like to create systemic change in a community college? We did a literature review, and we liked John Cotter's analysis. We thought that there was important work being done by Adriana Kazar, who's down at USC, and some others, but nothing felt really authentic to what we had observed at community colleges. And so we've come up with this 5-part framework of what it takes to lead lasting change, to make sure that the 4 years of work that many of you will be engaged in on guided pathways yields long-term systemic change. And it starts by communicating a vision and creating urgency for change, and then building college-wide ownership for change that the college as a whole is helping to flesh out. It requires aligning structures and resources to that change. And those are the 3 things that we'll be talking about primarily today. You'll hear routines of effective communication throughout. So as many of you are embarking on a new stage of reform, now, I recognize this is not new. Guided Pathways builds on much of the work that you've been doing. But as you're thinking about the next wave, we thought that it might make sense to focus particularly on the right side of this diagram in terms of what we'll be focusing on. There we go. So, I want to talk a little bit about transformational leadership and what it means to lead change that, how is it that change takes hold in these colleges that are seeing rapidly improving and sustained improvements in student success? Well, there are really 3 components. First is to build urgency. Second, effectively communicate the vision for change. And then finally, pay attention to why reforms fail. So I'm going to quickly run through these, and then we're going to turn it over to this terrific panel we have, a trustee, a president, and a faculty leader, who will talk a little bit about what this means on the ground at their colleges. At Valencia, the vision for change is often called a big idea. And one of the big ideas at Valencia was Start Right. I'll get into this in a moment. But rallying people around, I think Valencia has taken this to a place that a lot of colleges haven't, which is rallying everybody around a single idea, and they try to have one phrase that embodies that big idea. I'll talk a little bit about what this means, but think a little bit about what your big idea is as we walk through this presentation. What is the expression of Guided Pathways for you? What is the expression of what the college is going to do and focus on in the next few years? I loved what Chancellor Oakley said earlier, which is there are times when you have to say to folks, that's a great idea, but we're not there right now. We need to be here because this is what we're focused on. And what the best colleges do is they really do focus on a single vision for several years, and they resist the temptation to jump to something new, and they work hard to align their resources to something. So how do you build urgency? Well, there are really three components to building urgency that we've extracted from the field. First, you've got to broadly share clear, limited, and important data points. What do we mean by that? Well, do the data relate to outcomes that, if improved, would lead to students' ultimate goals? Remember, what's a student's ultimate goal? Getting a credential, having a better life after they leave, getting a job with family-sustaining wages. Those are students' ultimate goals. So, do the data relate to that in some way? It may be an interim measure, but it needs to relate to that. Second, does it elicit a no response to the question, is this outcome level acceptable? If you're going to build urgency, showing data about successes isn't going to do it, right? Nobody feels urgent when everything's rosy. Now, if you're at 80% graduation rate and 90% of your students are graduating into jobs with family-sustaining wages, maybe you don't need urgency. Anybody claim that? Right. So it needs to elicit a response. Are these data okay? Is it okay if we just stay right here? Thirdly, include some indicators or trends that can be changed in a reasonable period of time. It's not enough to talk about post-graduation success 5 years after graduating and leave it there. Your data need to lead to a conclusion where people can see actionable steps they can take and some interim measures that are going to help gain early wins. You need to have wins. Fourth, do they inspire action? Are you using the data to inspire action rather than assign blame? If you look at the data and say, we're terrible, no, that's not right. It inspires action. Is this okay for our students? What can we do to improve it? And then finally, drawing attention to institutional responsibility. So here are these few data points. And then finally, are the data easy to understand? We have a lot of people in our institutions who are very good with data charts and can pull out relevant information. And then we have folks who, frankly, don't think that way. They need to be relatively easy to understand. So first, share data. This is a chart that Valencia used for its Start Right initiative. And what it showed was that if students finished their first 5 courses, this is what the leadership came to. This is 8 or 10 years ago. This is not Guided Pathways, but it showed that if students finish their first 5 courses, no matter what they are, Dev Ed, honors courses, workforce, transfer-oriented, this was the completion rate that they saw. If they finish only 4 courses, this is the completion, 4 out of the 5 courses. And this is whether they withdrew or failed that 5th course. This is 3 courses and 2. That's a clear data chart that begs the question, what's going on here? Is this okay? Is it okay that students who fail or miss out on just 1 course, withdraw from 1 course, their chances of graduating go down that far? Simple data chart inspires the question, what can we do? Second, activate the student voice. It is very hard to have a conversation when the answer is, yeah, it's okay. These data are okay, when the student voice is heard. So what does that mean? What does it mean to activate the student voice? Well, there are a number of ways you can do it. You can engage in, sorry about the graphics here, but focus groups. You can bring focus groups together. At Miami-Dade College, when they were doing their Guided Pathways work, faculty had this idea that Guided Pathways were somehow going to constrict student choice and not let them explore fully through the curriculum. They had over 1,000 courses and 150 programs of study, and somehow organizing those for some faculty felt like it was not going to allow student choice. So what did they do? They got 30 faculty members to open up their classrooms and to have basically a portion of that class be a focus group. And they brought in 3 faculty members to every focus group, and they did it 30 times. So what did that mean? It meant that you had 90 faculty members listening to 900 students and reporting back on what they heard. And what they heard was, tell me what to do. I am really frustrated. I am taking courses that don't align to my pathway. I decide on my transfer destination and they're not taking the course. Tell me what to do. I'm wasting my time. I've got to get to work. And I can't afford 4 years to get my 2-year degree or 5 years. Help me figure out what to do. And that flipped everything because the student voice was consistent from honors courses to developmental education and everything in between. Student surveys can be valuable. And then secret shopper programs. I was talking to the folks from Bakersfield. There are a lot of ways to do secret shoppers. That sounds sort of, like you're going to send people in to be sneaky. It doesn't have to be that way. You can get online, try to register as a student. And I was just at a college where they registered as students, and they saw that they got 800 emails in the first 2 weeks of school. I don't think advising functions are going to work very well in terms of prioritizing what matters most. So there are a lot of ways of being a secret shopper, right? Try to experience what students experience. This is the beginning of design thinking. So activate the student voice. Activate it so people understand what students are experiencing. And then finally, creating urgency is about telling the human story. Tell the stories of individuals. Activate these individuals to talk about what it is they experience. For years and years, we operated on a sort of decision by anecdote. And I think Achieving the Dream and others, the Chancellor's Office has done good work over the last decade in helping, and leadership teams at all of your colleges, our IR folks, helping people understand that just because you had 3 successful students that you can tell the story of does not mean that students are successful. So we shifted over to data, and I think sometimes we lose telling the student story. So it's critical to look at data to see the students who we don't engage. But make sure you can tell the student story, not just of the successful, but of those who are struggling. So, building urgency. Then how do you communicate the vision? And I'm going to run through this very quickly. It's really important generally to create time and space for considering information. Communication is about both presenting ideas and listening. You're going to hear a little bit about communication, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this in our second session, which has been constructed by some others. But it's really important to give people the time and space to process the information and make sense of it. This is done through setting aside committee meetings for the processing of information. So these are a few ideas here. I'm going to quickly run through the reasons that initiatives fail. So another thing that I think is really important to do is that a lot of people when you start an initiative, a lot of people think, this isn't going to work. And they know on the front lines, they have a sense of why it's not going to work. So you've built urgency, you've communicated a vision, you've enabled people to understand, make sense of the data, understand where you're going. And then it's really important to let people voice their concerns early in the process. And that requires really paying attention to why reforms fail, but not assuming that as a leader you know the answer, but to really listen to folks. So, why do initiatives fail? This is a list that a group that I was working with came up with, and the list that they came back with of what they could do about it. People blame the student, right? It's the student's fault that they're taking the wrong course. So what do you do in those circumstances? They said, we've got to repeatedly activate the student voice.
Josh, we're running out of time. Just FYI, time check.
Pardon?
Time check. We're running out of time.
Okay, thank you. People don't believe this is going to get done. They think it's going to blow over. The college is going to move on to the next thing. Stick with it for a period of time. The college is suffering from a failure to focus and initiative fatigue. You see this all the time. This is the next new thing. Really important to maintain that discipline for multiple years. There's an absence of timeline for execution or evaluation. This surfaces at a lot of places. So what do? When beginning an initiative, ask the same series of questions. What's the timeline for figuring out if it works? How are we going to know if it works? And when are we going to make decision points about making changes? The Start Right initiative at Valencia did all of this. I'm not going to go into that in detail because we've got a terrific panel of folks who are going to tell us what things look like in terms of building urgency, communicating a vision, and making sure you're prepared to avoid the failures that exist on their campuses. And with that, let me introduce the panel. And thank you for your patience as I went over time. So from your left to right, that left, Bill McGinnis is a trustee at Butte Community College District. Julie Bruno is a professor at Sierra College and the chair of the California Faculty Senate. And Waldeab Itzhak is the president of River City College. Of course, all here.
Riverside City College.
Riverside. It says River City here.
And so my name is wrong too. So.
I got the I got the D part, but we corrected that part. But you can't have everything. Anyway, each of them is going to speak for up to 10 minutes about this notion of setting the stage for change and what their relative roles are in leading change around guided pathways. And I'll sit down and listen. So why don't we start with you,
So me, okay.
President Itzhak. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share the experiences that we are living through at Riverside City College. Building a sense of urgency for us, we started this debate in 2012 because we were gearing up for our reaffirmation of accreditation, and that's a good rallying point to mobilize the entire campus. Riverside, as is Baker, is an old, proud community college, and in our 100 years experience, we were only being placed in warning once, and that was not going to happen again. And so it was easy to mobilize. Furthermore, we were also preparing for our 100th anniversary. Now, what do you mobilize people around? How do you motivate that? Well, obviously, we wanted to have a stellar self-study, and we review all the data that we have. And the biggest frustration for us is to review our data of student success for numbers of years. And I always say it's as flat as the plains of the Midwest. Nothing has changed. And so we wanted to find a way of addressing that issue. We organized on different levels. Everyone was involved in that debate. And then we start having an internal reflection to be able to see, well, what pilot experiments have we done to address this problem? We have not been idle. So we look at our honor students, we look at our Puente, we look at our Umoja. We've looked at many, and the frustration always is scalability. And we had two, one by design and one that we had nothing to do with. The first one was with a grant from Bill and Melinda Gates. We took 600 to 700 students and created a cohort. We gave them everything they need to see if they could move the scale of success as fast as possible. And we based our strategy for student success on addressing two fundamental principles. The first is reducing the time for remediation, and the second is shortening the time for graduation. And so we were able to demonstrate that we could reproduce the same success rate that we normally have over 6 years in only 3 years. So we felt that that was a very reasonable success with 700 students because we cut down the time by 50%, which also means we cut down the budget by 50%. So it's a major savings in every sense of the word. The second one we ran by accident. We looked at our data of athletes because the ACCT were interested in a presentation of athletes, and what we found astonished us, that African American males athlete completed and transferred at 2.7 times their non-athlete counterparts. They are the same in every other aspect. And then we said, well, how about the Hispanic? And the Hispanic students also completed and transferred in 2.8 times. Now we're talking about 280%. We're not talking about 30%, 20% success rate. And so then we said, well, how about the privileged Caucasians? What happens to them? So when you look at the white male athletes compared to the non-athlete counterpart, they also transferred at 1.8 times. That's like 180 times. So that became a very important finding for us. And then we said, so what happened to the equity gap? Because we are challenged not only by a poor student success, but by also a persistent gap, in achievement gap between our students. And I should have shown the slide right there. Oh, thank you. So you can see at the bottom, you can see that the equity gap in the African Americans, the Hispanic, and the white is essentially wiped out. So we've achieved the proportionality index of 1. You can see that there is still a gap in the other one. So this became a very important motivation for us now to come up with a vision. We formulate that we now have some data, and we can now see how should we reorganize the approach to student success. And if I go to the next slide. There we go. So we came up with a model which should be a 1 + 2 + 2, where we can have 1 year for remediation. We can get students out from pre-college to college level, 2 years to complete an associate degree, and 2 years to get a bachelor's degree. We serve economically and educationally underserved community, and we felt that if we are going to be a source, a dynamic source of social equality, we will have to get people out of that poverty line irreversibly by moving them to the bachelor's degree. So the first thing we did is to sort them out by their qualifications and see that we have different strategies of how we move students who are in pre-college to those who are in the transfer, to those who are in the CTE areas. So this led us to also do a robust overhaul of our strategic planning process so that every institution, every department, discipline, division, all the way up should undergo a process of planning. And that was one of the important changes we are doing to change the culture of rollover, substituted by a culture of intentionality. And our integration allowed us to integrate vertically from a discipline to a department to a division, and also horizontally align between student services, academic affairs, and financial services. So that process is ongoing, and we felt that that process is helping us to have not only a clear direction, but also a clear delegation of responsibilities in every respect. So that is partly what we feel will help us in sustainability. And finally, we recognize that when the plan was finished, we had to do a complete reorganization, both of the administrative structure, but also of all the committee structures that we have. And so I'll summarize this. We created a new office we didn't have. We created a vice president for planning and development, and under that office, we had a dean of student success that merged counseling, library, tutoring, supplemental instruction, and ed advising under one umbrella, so that each of these major pathways should have people with a clear focus. We run away from the general counselor into counselors that are focused in these areas. And so now we're in the execution, and we're going by phase so we don't break the elasticity limit. Our first 1,000 students on the pathways will be launched in fall, and all of them will be on the College Promise. Thank you. Julie?
So good morning. I'm Julie Brown, the president of the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges. It's a pleasure to be here. Oh, well, thank you. It's kind of you. Sonia limited me to 3 main points, knowing probably that I could talk for longer. And so I did a huge brainstorm around this topic, and I finally found my 3 main points, I think, but I might throw in a 4th if I actually have some time. So I've been with the Academic Senate now for 7 years. I'm going into my 8th year, and it's my 2nd year as president. And the 3 big ideas that I want to share with you come primarily from that experience. I'm also a faculty member at Sierra College, and I know that you will hear from my good colleague, they're over here in the corner, Andrea Neptune later in the second panel, so I'll let her give you some of the information from my home college, but they're doing fantastic work, and I'm just so pleased to see all of them here. So first big one. In collaboration with your academic senate, create a cohort of faculty that are going to be really your champions, as Josh described them. We actually sometimes call them faculty advocates, but you will need a group of folks that have the skills necessary to really engage the college community regarding the change that you want to implement. The faculty should be brought in early and often. The work that you need to do here is really at the core of what faculty do. So I think having them in there at the beginning is really going to assist. Some of the skills that you might want to consider in thinking about these faculty folk, commitment to vision, excellent listeners, well respected in the college community. They enjoy healthy skepticism. Different disciplines are always useful because our discipline does inform the way that we see the world. So you're looking at STEAM, liberal arts, of course, counseling. Our counseling folks are critical to this work. Business, physical education, you want a nice variety there. Those faculty should have actions that show that they value diversity and that they can enjoy different perspectives, ideas, and beliefs in innovation. Strong emotional intelligence and empathy. Guys know where I'm going with this, right? Commitment to understanding and using collegial consultation. Excellent communicators and very comfortable with conflict. So when you have those faculty leaders, you want to make sure that you are providing the support that they will need to do the job, and this is sort of that resource piece. It's critical. Reassign time, resources, space and time to engage with others in the college community, and of course, I cannot stress the importance of food for meetings, and coffee, for that matter. Make room for change to happen in the established structure of the college and remove the real and perceived barriers. And these are the folks that are going to help you do that from the faculty side of the house. So they are going to be critical to your effort. Second point, use collegial consultation to build trust and the respect necessary to enact deep and lasting change. Relationships do matter. We are fortunate to have collegial consultation in community college. It really is what sets us apart from other systems in higher education and I think in the nation. And it helps us to be incredibly effective. At its heart and at its best, collegial consultation is really about good decision making. All perspectives are represented and valued. Students, faculty, classified, and administration, and the public, of course. We want to make sure that we have everything there that we need to make a good decision. Experts, of course, are given primacy, and that's my call out to faculty's 10+1 purview, but also students have experts, as well as our CBOs and our CIOs and all of our administrators. So really we want to engage that experts, give them the primacy that they deserve, but bring in the other voices that really provide context and connection, because those are going to be critical as well. Governance committees should be used throughout the entire college. And again, bring your academic senate in at the very beginning, as well as your student senate, classified senate, and management senates. Ensure that there are forums for deep faculty conversations on a regular and consistent basis. And again, I'm going to go back to the collegial consultation. If it's working well, it's the sign of a healthy college and solid relationships. I have often seen that a breakdown in the consultation process, either where it's not working quite so well or it's been circumvented or ignored, is often a more significant, it's a symptom of a more significant problem relating to trust, relationships, and communication. Change can be imposed in these situations, but it will be superficial. This is where you need to pay attention and ask for help, professional development. You really need to invest in the people in your college and ensure that those relationships are healthy and productive. It actually creates the foundation of trust and respect that's really needed to ensure deep and lasting change. Third, there will be conflict. Diverse perspectives, ideas, and opinions are critical for sound decision making, and with diversity of perspective, there is always the opportunity for and the threat of conflict. So, in and of itself, conflict is neither bad nor good. It's really the way that we handle it that makes it either productive or destructive, and that's what we want to be aware of. How you handle conflict in your institution really says quite a lot about the culture of your college. If handled well, conflict actually increases understanding, empathy, and can bring individuals and groups together. If handled poorly, it can be absolutely destructive for individuals, the college, and undermine any good work to change things for the better. Change always creates anxiety. And that anxiety can be productive in some ways. And that anxiety also heightens emotional responses. So anticipate these feelings, anticipate where you might end up with these conversations and the impact that will have on your college. Really strive to address all of these issues openly, honestly, with empathy and with genuineness of spirit. Assess how your college handles conflict. And one of the things that I've seen just generally in the years that I've been with the Academic Senate is that it really is sort of the canary in the coal mine. Is conflict avoided or ignored? Is there a culture of competition or aggression on your campus? Or is it collaboration and compromise, which is really where we want to go to, right? Do individuals genuinely respect and trust each other both during and after dealing with a difficult situation? These are some of the questions that you might think about as you're looking at your culture of your campus. Again, pay attention. This can be a barrier to change. So if your college is struggling with conflict, you need to address it head on, and that means professional development. It means digging in and doing the hard work to get everybody to a place where they can engage. Because if you can't engage, you're not going to have a whole lot of success in making changes. And there's ways that we can engage in really bringing our colleges together around some of these really fantastic principles that we're talking about for guided pathways and other work as well. So those are my 3 main points. And I think I have time. I don't hear somebody's voice telling me that I don't have time. So I am going to take presidential prerogative and give you one more. Celebrate the followers. We spend an extraordinary amount of time discussing leaders and leadership. We thank people for their leadership with an initiative or program. We discuss how there are leaders in all areas of our college and districts. This is absolutely true and good, but I often wonder why we don't celebrate the followers more, because without the followers, there are no leaders. If you've been leading an effort and you turn around and look behind you and there's nobody behind you, I don't think it's an effort any longer. You're not really a leader because you don't have followers. So I think we really want to celebrate the followers, and I think we need to make sure that we give them the support that they need to be good followers. Those followers believe in the vision. They believe, they have that commitment to assisting the leader, and so I think we want to absolutely have celebration, support, honoring all of those efforts. You are only as good as the people that surround you. My 7 years, thank you, just got a nod. My 7 years in the Academic Senate has really taught me that, and so I think a good leader recognizes that, and they are essential. Followers are an essential part of the equation when we look at leadership, so please celebrate the followers. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill McGinnis. I'm a trustee in my 25th year at Butte College. And yes, it's the Butte College, the home of Aaron Rodgers. When I was asked to talk today, it was from the perspective of how trustees become involved in this process and why should we be interested and concerned in it. And as I think back, about how we started this conversation at our institution, I'm reminded of a few things. One of which was I started reading the book early on about revising America's community colleges and simply brought it to a board meeting and set it on my desk. That's all I did. And it got people thinking, if he's reading that, what should we be doing? And they started looking into the book and realized the message that was in there and got involved in it. And our president grabbed it and said, we're going to read this book. The academic president got it and grabbed it and said, we're going to read this book. I didn't have to challenge anybody to do it. It was simply getting the message across and creating that sense of somebody's looking into something that may be important, and we better figure it out. And trustees have a very large impact on what our institutions do. And if our trustees do not create a climate for change and a climate for risk-taking, it will not occur. We have to support that. But more importantly, we have to create this sense of urgency along with everybody else. And when I think back, we started a student performance scorecard some half a dozen years ago and reviewed that with the trustees in our annual retreat and talked about it. But there were a couple things missing from that, and we've gone through some evolutions in what's in the data and what's out of the data. But the two things we were missing was, what's the performance of our community? How many people in our community finish high school? How many don't? And those students that don't are going to be our students sometime in the future. And we're going to have to deal with them and educate them and try to get them to become productive people in the community. And unless we understand that loss of students at the high school level, and I'll give you an example, it was 23%. That's a lot of people. Until we understood that, we didn't understand the urgency of what we had to do. The other thing I wanted to say with data is this. You can keep trustees in the dark two ways. You don't give them enough information, or you give them an IBM run, right? And so if your student performance report goes on forever and has multiple tables and is 20 or 30 pages long, trustees are going to get lost. And so I urge you, focus on the important issues, those issues that are critical that you think to the success of your students. I like what the Aspen Institute is talking about, and not just taking a look at the winners, but let's take a look at the losers and what are those roadblocks that we've created or those speed bumps that we've created, and how can we overcome them? And also part of that is to hear the student's voice. And what are they saying about our institution? And again, not just the successful ones. We always hear those students. We celebrate them at graduation. We hear their speeches at graduation. But we got to hear about the students that can't make it. Why are they dropping out? What's causing that reduction? Excuse me, my allergies are getting to me. And why are they falling out of the process? And what can we do to recover them? As you know, a large portion of our budget is focused on FTE, butts in the seats. We're, like everybody else in the state, suffering from a decline in student enrollment for a variety of factors. And so we have created this sense of urgency of getting people in. So when students don't reappear, we're calling them up and we're asking, why aren't you back here? What's created this problem? Well, we need to take that data, not just to get them back in, but to find out what we can do to make them successful. Trustees need to hear those stories so that we can support the administration in its programs and adequately fund the programs that it feels are necessary to keep students enrolled and to help students move through more quickly and successfully. And when I think about the budget, you know, we just finished the budget discussion at our campus. Half of that budget discussion was talking about how we're going to increase the FTE because we're below a certain line, and if we stay below that line, we're going to lose $1 million, blah, blah, blah. You know, we all know those problems, and that means we're going to have to lay good faculty off or something, right? Yeah? So we said, we're not going to cut faculty. We're not going to cut the mission of the college. We're going to try to figure out a way to keep this program going, and we're going to come up with a plan to keep students in the seats. Now, you would think that that would run contrary to an issue of getting students through more quickly. But in a sense, it isn't. If we at Butte College could say to students around this country, if you come to us, you can get through in 2 or 3 years, more students will come. Those students will want to be there. rather than having to go somewhere else where it may take them 4 or 5 or 6 years. And so we feel like it's a good recruitment tool as well as a good student success tool in moving people into the workforce. The trustee role in communicating the vision of what we're doing is really important. And not just the initial stages of why we're doing this, but to keep that message alive and out loud. Going to the community groups that we link up with and talking about what our colleges are doing. Talking about this in press releases to the community in support of the administration. And talking about it at board meetings. And giving the support, again, by communicating that message, but also in the budget discussion. So as we talked about our budget this last month, we talked about how we can keep this program going, career pathways going, and the academic pathways going in light of a deficit in our budget. And we talk about how we can use the block grants that are coming to us to support this program and keep it alive. Now, the other thing that's important with the budget is to understand it's not a 1 year or 2 year program that we're embarking on. It's a long-term program, and we have to be willing to commit those dollars down the road. So we're taking a look at our long-term expenses that are coming in with the PERS increases, STRS increases, what may or may not happen with health insurance, et cetera, et cetera. And we're trying to figure out, okay, how can we fund those things, fund our ongoing operations, and yet keep on this path that we wanted to go to, this Guided Pathways program. And we're making it a vital part of our conversations. And my final point for trustees, of course, trustees come and go, not like faculty. So we have to, some of us don't go, I guess. But we have to create a culture on our board that can sustain this movement. So if we do get a change in leadership in the chancellor or in the president, when we recruit that new president or that new chancellor, we say to that person, look, this is a program that we're dedicated to, and we want to see continued on our campus. What's your involvement with that in the past? What's your support of that? Does that fit where you think you want to go? Because that's where we want to go. The other part of that is we get new board members, is to educate those board members about what our culture is. And that it's about student success. It's about moving them through. So we have to do that job and never give up. And to deal with roadblocks and speed bumps as they come along and continue to carry that message forward. And I think if the trustees can do that, that the faculty will understand this isn't the latest and greatest PFE program, or isn't the latest and greatest whatever program, but it's going to be here for a long time and be part and become part of the college's culture.
Thank you so much. I want to just
Guys, real
pause. Okay.
quick. Hopefully, I got to say this. Hopefully, with the work of the chancellor in getting our budgets moved off of butts in the seats to performance, we can then rededicate ourselves to that.